Warning, this video contains spoilers. Hey guys, and welcome to another game review. Today's game that I will be reviewing is Sly 2 Band of Thieves. Sly 2 Band of Thieves was released in 2004, and its platforms have been the PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, and the PlayStation Vita. And I also want to note that all of the gameplay clips in this video were recorded by me in my playthrough for this review. So without further ado, let's begin the review. So the first thing I want to look at is story. And at the end of the first Sly Cooper game, basically you defeat Clockwork Owl, who is the crazy mechanical owl of hate, whose sole purpose is to wipe out the entire Cooper family line. And the plot of this game picks up right where it left off, where now after defeating Clockwork, you have to find all of his parts, which have been stolen by the Claw Gang, which is a group of basically villains. And basically you make your way through the game, trying to find the parts as the main goal of the game, trying to find the parts, and on your journey, you travel to like different countries and different places of the world, fighting evil. And at the end of the game, the cop Neela, who through the entire game first betrays you, and then she betrays the cops, and then she betrays the villain. So she basically betrays everyone, Neela. And she then, at the end of the game, gets Clockwork's parts entirely assembled. She hops in and basically becomes Clockwork, or I hate to say this because it just sounds so stupid, Clockla? Yeah, that's the name of the final boss of the game, is Clockla, a mix of Clockwork and Neela. I don't know why, that's just painful to say. Anyways, you go through all that, and you defeat her, and get all the parts, and destroy them, and all that. All in all, I thought the story of this game was really good. Actually, I thought the story of this game was great. And one of the best parts about it was that each level ties to the story perfectly. They somehow managed to make the levels and the story, the gameplay and the story, perfectly blend together. So you literally are playing your way through the story, like hand in hand, story and gameplay. Which so many games, especially level-based games, kind of fail to do that. So I was pretty impressed by that. All the characters were really good and really memorable. You have Sly Cooper, who's the, kind of head thief. You've got Murray, he's the muscle of their gang. And then you've got Bentley, who's kind of the brains of their operation. And then you've got, Carmelita Fox, who's like the cop, who's in the first game. And then, of course, you have Neela, who's the main villain of the game. And you have all the other villains throughout the game that are all very memorable. And, just very well-written characters. All in all, thought the game's story was really good, and I'm going to have to give this game, for story, a 10 out of 10. That is a perfect score, and I do not give those out very often, so that means that this game's story was perfect. Next up is graphics. And this game had really great graphics. I mean, just from the world design, to the character design, to the boss design, because to me, in games with bosses, boss design really matters because they should be memorable. And I honestly thought all of the bosses in this game were very memorable. Especially, I would have to say, the final boss, Clockla. That thing looked cool. I mean, I wouldn't say it looked as cool as the final boss of the first Sly Cooper game, Sly Cooper and the Thievius Raccoonus. Clockwork looked really cool, but Clockla also looked, very good. All in all, just the graphics were really cool. I also liked the cutscenes. They did them in kind of a comic book sort of style, and I just thought that was a really smart idea because especially with those older games from like the early 2000s, they couldn't animate cutscenes very well. So it was really smart of them to do those comic book cutscenes, and they were just something different. and unique and just kind of cool. The only thing I would have to say against the graphics would have to be that I thought some of the levels, especially earlier in the game, were a tad bit dark. The atmosphere I thought was a tad bit dark, making it kind of hard to see the nice details. And I also thought that things could be a little bit grainy at times. Like if you looked at the main character, Sly Cooper, his edges were a little bit jagged, which you didn't see that in the first Sly Cooper game. I actually thought the first Sly Cooper game, which was released 2 years earlier in 2002, actually looked graphically slightly better than this one. But I still think it looked really, really good. And I'm going to have to give this game a 9 out of 10 for graphics. That is a great score. I just thought that the game looked really great. So the third thing that I want to talk about is gameplay. And whenever I'm doing my game reviews, gameplay is the main thing I look at when I'm coming up with my final scores. And this game was pretty great when it came to that. I mean, just from the game mechanics to the level design, it was all very good. And I also liked that, unlike the first Sly Cooper game, this one allowed you to play as all 3 of the main characters. It allowed you to play as Sly Cooper, Bentley, and Murray. And all their, skills and traits were different. So it's like you had 3 completely different characters. I thought that was pretty cool. I also thought that the bosses were pretty good, though I will say one slight complaint I would have to have with the bosses is the bosses were like way harder than the rest of the game. So that would be a little bit of a complaint. And I also thought that the final boss was a tad bit kind of frustrating because they don't, it was kind of hard to figure out how to beat. Whenever those like spinning ring things start coming at you, I had like no clue what I was supposed to do with those until I died like 4 times. And then I was like, oh, shoot them once they turn off, shoot them again, they turn back on. That took me a while to figure out. But all in all, I thought the game was very fun, and I'm going to have to give this game a 9 out of 10 for gameplay. That is a great score. Now, just 2 more things I want to talk about before I give you the final score. First thing I want to talk about is difficulty. I would have to say, honestly, I think this game was about the same difficulty-wise as the first Sly Cooper. Basically, I thought the levels, for the most part, were really easy, aside from the last levels, but the bosses, like I said, were all very hard. Especially the boss against that tiger guy. That was really hard, the second boss. Just because his health bar is so high. And you have to fight him this way where it's like, okay, you have to like punch, and then jump, but go like jump around him so you can dodge his attacks. And you gotta jump at just the right moment. And then punch, and jump and dodge. And you just have to do that over and over and over again. And it's actually quite a long boss. I also thought that the final boss of the game was very difficult. Like I said, those ring things took me a while to figure out, and it's just so fast-paced, and I found that, like, aiming the gun was kind of hard. But all in all, I wouldn't say that this game as a whole was that hard, so I'm going to have to give this game a 7 out of 10 for difficulty. It was kind of, I would have to say, your average game's difficulty. Now, the last thing I want to talk about before giving you all the final score is playthrough length. And this game, like I said, was a lot longer than the first Sly Cooper, and that's a good thing, because the first one was too short. At only 3.5 hours, I beat the first one in 1 day. This game here took me a total of 13.5 hours. That is a pretty decently long game, especially for that time, for 2004. I would actually have to say that's a pretty long game. But I would have to say that was definitely the right length. I wouldn't have really wanted this game any shorter or any longer. Now it is time to give you all the final score. And the final score for this game is 9.2 out of 10. That is a great score. That's actually a better score than I gave the first Sly Cooper. And if you want to know what I gave the first Sly Cooper, make sure to check out that video. It will be on my channel, Baron Von Baron. So make sure to go check that out if you want to see that. But all in all, I thought this game was really good. It had great graphics, great gameplay, and the story was downright perfect. So thanks for watching, and make sure to sub, like, and comment below.